You are listening to Fantha Tracks.
Because of the following special program, Wonder Woman and the Incredible Hulk will not be presented this evening.
It's time to get all your Star Wars news in a single file. This is Making Tracks. Here are your hosts, Mark Newbold and Mark Mulcaster.
That's not true. That's impossible.
You're listening to Making Tracks and a very special episode brought to you from Farthest From 22 Live. I'm your co-host Mark Newbold, and joining me today, as always, is the guy that's going to introduce himself.
Hello, I am the guy that likes to introduce himself. Others seem to know me as Mark Mulcaster.
Farthest From 22 was a bit of a success, and during that conversation we had the good fortune to catch up with Anthony Daniels, amongst other guests, and talk about his time in the Star Wars galaxy. Here's Goldenrod himself, Anthony Daniels, at Farthest From 22 Live.
So we're here at Farthest From 22 with Anthony Daniels. Good afternoon, how are you?
I'm very good. Thanks for inviting me along.
Pleasure. Looking forward to chatting, seeing what's going on with the world. But right now, the world is kind of skew-if with everything that's happening with the lockdown. How are you coping with the lockdown at the moment?
Pretty well, because, we're surrounded by parks in central London, so we can get out. But also, I am pretty busy, amazingly enough, doing all sorts of broadcasts and recordings for Disney and other people.
So you're coping, you're managing, there's stuff to do.
Oh, lots of stuff. And one of the important things is, and it's difficult sometimes to stay positive. And I've got to admit, there are days I wake up and, still think, is it a dream? It's not a dream, but I take it seriously. If I go out, I go shopping, I'm wearing a mask, which is pretty normal for me, obviously.
Yeah.
But I'm wearing rubber gloves and so on, and I make sure that if I get coins, they get cleaned before they get used again. We all have to be careful, and it's not a joke anymore. But staying positive, staying healthy is really good. And the dining room's now a gym with some free weights and a mat and all that kind of thing. So staying fit and healthy is good.
Good. You make a really good point about going out and wearing a mask. That is really no big issue for you, is it?
Absolutely not. In fact, it's rather more comfortable than my Star Wars mask, and we might talk about that in a bit.
Absolutely. We spoke last for Star Wars Insider last summer, just before the book was due to be announced, I think.
The book, yes. I hope by now everybody has got their own copy. And people do seem to have enjoyed kind of some of the inside stories, particularly kind of looking at the pictures and so on. And what I thought would be fun is, for instance, here, if we can look, there's some greeblies.
Yes.
It's a term made up for Star Wars on the spot, kind of what is as opposed to a thingamajig.
Yes.
It became a greebly. And this, I wonder if you can guess which greebly that is.
Oh.
I'll give you a clue. It is a neck greebly.
Yes.
It's one of those things that went there. And this was the problem, that this had to go into a tiny little gizmo in the neck. And when you push this in, it pushed the neck away. So it was like playing catch up. And all the time I'm inside there. So that is a neck greebly. Another question. Do you want another question?
Absolutely.
Okay, let me, what is this?
Ooh, oh, hang on. Is it the wires across the belly, is it?
No.
No?
What is it?
I don't know.
Okay, wires is good. As you can see, they're actually printed on, hand painted, silkscreen, really. If I give you a clue, I don't know if you can see this. They went there,
okay,
the elbow, and the back of the knees. So when you looked at 3PO's costume, you thought there were wires there. In fact, they were just black material with paint on. How cute is that?
So
you want another one?
Oh, go on. Give us another one. I'd love another one.
Okay. Be careful here. What is this?
Wow. Okay.
Or
I dare to hazard a guess. It feels like some kind of finger, but I may be wrong.
it is one of the original fingers, and I'm not very good at guessing, but I would say it weighs about 3 or 4 ounces, and that's just one finger. It's really chunky. I think it's made of steel, actually. It's all welded together, and there's a spring inside. But if I put my finger next to it, you see it bears no relation to my hand. They just made it up. They had a cast of my body, but they didn't allow it to work in any useful way. And that's why picking things up in the first movie was so difficult, because it just didn't have a function. It looks beautiful. It was hand sculpted, very carefully done, and just total rubbish. Sorry.
So when you, in that original film, the moment I can picture you specifically picking something up is when you pick up the little comlink when you're speaking, when they're in the trash compactor. How did that work if you literally couldn't pick it up?
Okay, well, you've got it. It's in the book. I specifically tell that story because it's kind of curious. R2 and 3PO are locked in the control room where the others have gone off to find the princess. Yep. And the stormtroopers leave, and 3PO hears this sound, I think. Anyway, he needs to pick up the comlink. It's a little white gizmo. And to do that, if you watch the film again, and you've got time now, because also all of these films are coming out, re-released on the Blu-ray thing. Yep. Well, no, it's on Disney Plus.
Disney Plus, that's right, yeah.
You think are they going to send me Disney Plus? I mean, you think.
Yeah.
Message to Disney.
At least a discount.
From Disney? Are you kidding? Well, if you look at the original, you'll see that I think you get a shot of the thing, the gizmo, and then my left arm comes into shot. The hand comes down on the gizmo, and it comes out of frame like that. In fact, the only piece of costume I had on that day was the arm and the hand, and I plonked the hand on top of the gizmo, and of course it comes into the shot. And the reason it could was because I couldn't grip it, really. It stuck in the hand because there was a blob of double-sided sticky tape there. So I smacked it, glued it. And then you cut to the wider shot, torso shot, and you see me holding it. And it's still glued in my hand. And your brain, and films rely on your brain doing a lot of work here. You put them together because you never think that's 2 shots, 2 different setups, cameras in a different place. And you never think sticky tape, do you?
It's the old Blue Peter method, isn't it?
And that's one of the things I loved about the original Star Wars. It was totally Blue Peter. R2D2 was often on a bit of wire that was being hauled directly or went through a loop. So they pulled the wire here, and R2 would travel towards the loop, and then they'd take the loop away, and R2 could turn and go off on that distance. And Blue Peter, the hover car, Luke's land speeder. Yeah. They hid the wheels with mirrors so that you think that you're watching the sand behind, sand in front. I, of course, have a Blue Peter badge. Not just any Blue Peter badge. I have a gold.
Why am I not surprised?
I have a gold Blue Peter badge, and it gets me nowhere.
I was going to say, that must open doors.
What? They shut the doors. They say, not another one.
Well, speaking of, you make a good point. You go back to the early days of Star Wars there. We had a very, very good question from Andrew Preston. And I'll read it out. It says, we've all heard the horrors of filming under the hot Tunisian sun in 1976 in the costume. But from your perspective, what was the best thing about filming in that country, in that part of the world?
The best thing about filming in Tunisia? This is not a phrase normally understood in the English language, at least. The best thing about...
Well, the sun effect's nice.
No, leaving was good.
Okay.
No, I'm trying to think, actually. Oh, I remember so many things. And again, I talk about a lot of them in the book, actually arriving into the desert location. The crummy road surfaces, basically it was just slightly more than 1 lane wide. We're talking 40-something years ago now. And I remember the sand very much. I remember how cold it was. And Andrew, it wasn't often that hot in the desert. There are some days where the crew was sunbathing. Other times you see them in parka jackets and goggles with the sand. Sand, gets blown about a lot. and it gets in everywhere. And you can see in this shot, there's a close-up of George, if I can light it up. He's directing me.
Yeah.
And you see, we've all got goggles on because the sound is just blowing in our faces. And of course, we relived that recently in wonderful Jordan. Now, if you want to go somewhere like that, go to Jordan. The people were lovely, absolutely. They had no idea what we were doing, but I'm not sure we did either, frankly.
Was that a common thing back, especially on the original trilogy, when you went out on location? I guess by the time of Return of the Jedi, people were more clued up. But for example, when you went on location in the original, the first two films, I'm thinking specifically, I guess they had no idea.
Well, the first film, it was this silly little sci-fi movie, and we had cameras and, the stuff of normal filming. But then we had all these droids and whatever, and hardly any of them worked. Anything with wheels and motors, like R2, or there was a funny kind of black dome thing.
Yes.
They would start off with best intention, and in moments they would just grind to a halt and go off piece, because the sound just gets in the gears, and that's it. But you wouldn't have known that it was a science fiction film, I suppose, really, apart from C-3PO, because I'm just thinking back, because we had the Jawas, wonderful. Yeah. But we were a small unit and we had some local helpers, but it was tough. But Andrew, the desert wasn't the problem as far as heat goes. When we came back to Elstree, boy, until I think a couple of years ago, it had never been hotter in England than that summer. And I just cooked. The roads were melting outside. The reservoirs were running dry. Water was rationed. There were standpipes in the street. And I was cooking. Everybody was cooking, but I was cooking inside my own pressure cooker. That was pretty tough, actually. But
it couldn't have been a worse summer to film, could it, really? 76. Well, I remember that. I was only 5, but I remember 76.
Yeah. And the odd thing was that in Tunisia, the weather couldn't have been worse. It rained for the first time in 30 years where we were. How crazy is that?
But wasn't there for instance on Phantom Menace when the weather was ridiculously bad and it came out of the blue?
Phantom Menace.
Episode 1, there was a gale, like a storm, an unprecedented storm in that part of the world.
I have no idea. One funny story, when the night we arrived in Tunisia, and I can't remember the place where the airport was, I had a room quite near reception. So in the middle of the night, there was loud shouting of tourists arriving late and arguing about rooms. I want to sleep. So and they had very distinctive accents, I remember. And then a couple of days later, when we were on the salt flat at Tozeur, suddenly this coach arrived with these same tourists, and they all got out and they wanted to look. And the police security said, you can't come here. This is a closed place. And they couldn't believe they had flown from Europe to visit this endless salt flat. And I remember as they huffed off into the distance, one of them yelling, "We will never see your lousy movie." I still laugh about it because I bet they did see it.
I bet they did. Everybody saw it.
Yeah, back then they really did.
Hi, this is Gareth Edwards, director of the best standalone Star Wars film since Caravan of Courage, called Rogue One. You're listening to Panther Tracks. Enjoy.
Well, actually, that brings me to another very good question from one of our readers, John Golombisky. I'm saying his name all wrong. I do apologise, John. When you first saw, this is for you, obviously, when you first saw Robert Downey Jr. in his Iron Man motion capture suit on a climate-controlled soundstage, were you jealous?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Yes. I mean, what do you think? Absolute magic. And I hope if we ever do this again, I could do it in mocap, because even when I'm dubbing the voice in a sound studio, I'm not wearing the costume. People say they can see 3PO, no pun, because to create his voice, I do stand exactly like him, very upright, sort of correct, and so on. So I know I can actually, I could do it in mocap. So Disney, if you're listening, hey.
Right. Is it like muscle memory? Because we talked about this before, all the pinch points and such makes the posture the way it was. But when you're out of the costume, inherently, do you kind of know where the bite point is for the elbows and such?
Yeah, it is muscle memory. As with rehearsing to pick something up, say the binders in that same in that control room. At one point, Mark says, hand me the binders. Now, the only way I could pick them up was to have rehearsed before we were shooting to know where my elbow and my hand had to be, because I'm flying blind there. I'm not. It looks like I can see them, but I can't. So muscle memory is really important, and after a period of time, you get used to it.
I suppose your spatial awareness goes, doesn't it, when you're looking through pinpricks?
Spatial awareness, sense of perspective, sense of location, it all goes. No peripheral vision means that if you're standing next to me, normally I'd be able to see peripherally. But with 3PO, next time you see a horse with blinkers on, it's me. Yeah. Not literally, I don't play horses, but so I have to know somebody is there in order to clock them directly. Otherwise, 3PO would spend the whole time like a blind person feeling for where people are. Different character.
With the 9th film coming out now, Rise of Skywalker, what were your, looking back on it now, because we're a few months removed from the film coming out, you had probably, well, certainly more screen time in this film than any film since the original. Some great lines. How pleased were you with the end result?
Yes, please. Some of there was wonderful stuff in that film. So much stuff. Some of my stuff was slightly truncated, but so is everybody's actually. Some of the build-ups weren't there, and some of the hard to describe really, but maybe one day there'll be an even longer version and you'll see. But I so loved the idea that Chris Terrio, the writer, and J.J. Abrams had come up with, of the one thing 3PO has always boasted about is his languages. And then, I'm afraid I cannot tell you. What do you mean? And that was such a clever story premise. And to play this with Oscar Isaac in particular, his attitude was like Han Solo's attitude to 3PO, but a bit kinder and a bit funnier. We used to giggle a lot, but I so enjoyed doing that sequence. Also, the bit about telling Artu, what does he say? I want to tell you that you have been a true friend, my best one, in fact. It's very sort of English thing not to talk about friendship. Yes. It's kind of unspoken. And then, of course, that horrifying line, and I really got goosebumps when I saw it in the trailer. What are you doing, 3PO? Taking one last look, sir, at my friends. Oh. And it was moving because I knew he wasn't going to die, as it were. But being the last movie, being the 9th movie, it was there on the set saying goodbye to Ray and Poe and Finn. But also, I think there was a slightly clever double entendre with, I'm saying goodbye to the fan force, if you will.
Yeah.
I had the best time ever on this movie, and was hugely sort of, when I eventually saw it properly, wow, And because it's amazing, because you're seeing it from the camera's point of view, as opposed to being in the suit and kind of working out wherever and trying not to bump into things. And thank goodness for the three main guys, because they would catch me or hold me up. And I remember in that scene particularly, Daisy walking me through the set to my start position, because there were wires everywhere and whatever. And whoever was nearest would just kind of, I was like an old uncle. Oh, wait a minute. There's another, it's time to play What Is This again? What is this?
Oh, wow. Wow. I do not know.
Okay, another clue. What is this?
It looks like a letterbox. My Star Wars knowledge is being terribly shown up here.
Star Wars letterbox. Post in space. Post in space. Finally. Now I'm doing this because I know you're a kind of memorabilia type program, yeah? People wanted to talk about the old stuff.
Absolutely, yeah.
What is this?
I do not know, but it looks fascinating.
Right. What is it? Okay, do you want to know?
Go on.
I think people have well, hey, if you it's rush to your book and on page whatever. I don't know. Is it here? I thought it was. Maybe not. Well, anyway, they're bits of the Millennium Falcon.
Ah, okay.
Oh, I know. They're on a different section because these are actually from the Falcon that was used in Return of the Jedi. Was that number 6? Yes, it was.
So 6?
Because that's when they were burning it at Elstree Studios. They were actually made a bonfire. And two things are shocking. First of all, they were burning its plastic like this. You wouldn't do that these days. They would get recycled. Interestingly, in episode 8, I was leaning in a photo shoot on the most beautiful vehicle, space vehicle, like a racing car, stunning, polished, everything. And I said to the guy next to me, wow, this is astounding. He said, yeah, thank you, I made it. I didn't know. He was a sculptor and a technician and all that. So I went on about how brilliant it was. And he said, yeah, I'm going to chop it up tomorrow. Really? Yeah, there's no room for storage. And he said, and then I have to separate all the plastic and the metal or whatever for recycling. So things have changed. But these were going to be on a bonfire because there was nowhere to store the Millennium Falcon. It was never going to be used again.
No.
When famous last words. And I just picked them up out of, I felt sad, actually. Quite like the Falcon. And I felt sad that it was going to be incinerated without any witnesses. Okay, we'll do another guess what in a minute.
Okay, I do have a question for you. Another reader's question. Yes, here we go. From Mark Daniels. Back in the early 90s, Star Wars was largely overlooked as a franchise by that point. Just a small band of fans keeping the dream alive. Did you think Star Wars could or would make a comeback? Or did you, at that point, think it was pretty much done for good?
I thought it was pretty much done for good. Because, I was surprised after episode 6. I thought that was it. Yeah. We had a little farewell party, I guess. Then came 1, 2, and 3. That was a big surprise to me, 14, 15, 16 years later. I can't remember. And then we had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. In whatever order you choose. And again, this is a bigger debate as did Guido shoot first. Let's not go there. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 made sense. Time passed. And now we've made 9. And I think that's it. I made a little farewell speech at the end of 9 because it was the 3rd time I said goodbye. But I think this time, as far as movies go, well, never say never. There are numbers bigger than 9, that's for sure.
Well, another question. John Hoey from the Resistance broadcast asked a very good question, actually. Going back to what you just said, are your days inside the metal suit done? But going to what you said earlier, if so, could you see yourself voicing a live-action 3PO with either somebody mocapping it or perhaps you mocapping it or somebody else going through the uncomfortable rigours of being in the suit? What would your feelings on that be?
Well, we'd have to see what the production was, but mocapping probably is a way to go. One of the issues, you have a slight issue, you'd have to fudge stills and, as it were, on the floor of the set. You would have a guy in a mocap suit. But then I guess you take stills from the actual footage once it had been ILM'd. Wow, let's have a moment's thought for ILM.
Yes.
Terrific. You have no idea what they do for these movies because it looks seamless. Yeah. Okay, and the prequels, a little too much green screen. We talked about that. Yes. But there are all sorts of nuances that the audience don't know that ILM really had their fingers in there. I'm so proud to know them. Quite amazing.
Do you find that aspect of movie making fascinating from a watcher's view? I mean, you get a behind the scenes, you see the guys on set doing the bits they need to do, but when you step back and watch the process of what comes out of it, does that fascinate you as much as any moviegoer?
Absolutely. And if I come back in another life, I think it would be behind the camera because it's a fascinating field. And here's a little side issue. Anybody who's watching and looking for a career, somebody who hasn't quite decided what they might do in life, the film industry, which is now huge and will be again, in a few months' time, we hope. It's huge in England. Pinewood Studios is taking over the planet, really. And the skill set here in England is astounding. And the skills needed to make a film, whether it's somebody who can do the accounting, somebody who can work in plaster work, and a lot of the sets still use plastering that we know from where we live. That's a wall. Plasterers can do so much that it's magic. Sculptors who can sculpt in clay, like Liz Moore did to make my costume, or people who can sculpt in polystyrene, or people who can woodwork or do electricity, understand lighting, are fascinated by props. I mean, this was created by the props department. They got some kind of trunking, they shoved a lot of kind of telephone wires through it, and it suddenly looks like a real thing. And the props department, people, the whole set with their stuff, how they do it. And look at the new film, The Rise of Skywalker. The scene where Babu Frick, my eldest friend, that set was really quite tiny. There, I would say, were hundreds and hundreds of props hanging from the ceiling. You know, you'll have the ability on Blu-ray to freeze that and just count all those bits of robots that are hanging from the ceiling on shelves and whatever. And here's a weird thing. We shot a lot there. And then suddenly that set was turned into the bar where we crash through before you get to Babu Frick's. Yes. And we 3PO trots through. And of course, gives John Williams a glance. How wonderful to be in a scene with John Williams. He's the guy with the eyepiece.
Yes.
And again, on the table, there are references to all his films in models. And so that was redressed. But then it was done back up again as Babu Frick shop. So they put all those hundreds of things back again. But I'm talking about who works in the industry. There are runners, there are first assistants, second assistants, third assistants, people who help the movie. There's costumes, makeup, hair, people who make leather things. You look at Star Wars, everything has been made. There were these flamethrowers in the scene. I think it was at 7. It was a night shoot, and I was there because I was fascinated. And I said to somebody, I said, part of the crew, you know, where do you buy flamethrowers? You don't. We make them. That's terrifying. But they do that. I said in the bunker in one of the episodes, where do you get all this stuff from, this military equipment? He said, well, we make it. We make a thing, and then we print it and we reproduce it. And you see, I've been doing this for some years, and I just assume they buy things. No. And the length of time, those wonderful red stormtrooper outfits in this last film, there was a whole team who spent months and months fine-tuning every edge of every costume. And I'm saying, well, why don't you just make 3 and have like ordinary ones? Oh, no, because the camera might want to come around the back and whatever. Of course, in episode 8, I actually did become part of the crew, and I worked with props because I was helping the waiter droids, and I had such fun doing that. But some of the props were a little heavy and a little difficult to work with. But being part of the crew there's a picture of me working with Zola, I think, who was a waiter droid. And sadly, that scene was astounding to be in. There was hundreds of people in front of the camera, hundreds of people behind the camera. You didn't get a chance to see it all. Sorry, that was a rather long answer.
Not at all, no. I mean, you say about being behind the camera, in another life you would consider that. What position would you like to be? Would it be a physical, hands-on creative position, an overview, a director position? What do you think it would have been?
I'd be no good as a director, but I think on the physical side, one of the great things now is, I should mention that the story that I think is interesting from the original Star Wars, where I was amazed that the only person who could see what was being filmed was the cameraman with his eye to the lens, if you will. And then George would say, how was that? And he'd be, it's okay. Or, little story here, hair in the gate. Oh, right. And you do it again. And after a while, I thought, who's this idiot who's, putting dandruff in the machinery? Hair in the gate is a technical expression. It means that the surface, the emulsion on the film, as it goes through the gate, scrapes off. And in old films, you would see little at the bottom, a little black line. And that was where the emulsion had scraped off and messed the film. Meant you had to do it again. And they would check, because they'd open up, and they would see the emulsion, and they knew, here it again, do it again. But eventually I realized that it is also a way of saying, that actor was so bad in that scene that you need to do it again. But hey, don't annoy the actor. Just say, here and again.
I'm Neil deGrasse Tyson, and you are following Fantha Tracks.
We spoke about it in Insider recently last year. You've been through 3 very distinct eras, not only of Star Wars, but also of cinema, coming from the 70s, coming off it was a real sort of classic run of movies up to the 70s. A new era starts with Lucas and Spielberg. You're right in the thick of that. The digital era of the prequels, you're in the middle of that. And now you've got this beautiful merging of CGI, practical creatures, everything. You've seen every iteration of that. So, impossible question, but what era do you think worked the best? What era do you feel the most affection for?
Kind of have affection for the old one, the original. That first film was not great joy, but there was an innocence, a Blue Peter quality about it that I liked. You know, a kid could make a robot that pulled along on a piece of string. Now the technology has become phenomenal, but shall we say in The Rise of Skywalker, back to the set pieces, literally the sets, towering pieces of invention and creativity made by people's hands using machines, using all sorts of materials to fool me on the set, literally.
Yeah.
I think there was a moment that I slightly mistook, because I think I kicked a rock in the Rebel base, and it wasn't made of polystyrene. It was a real rock. So you had to be careful. But one of the other things that has stayed quite a lot is puppetry. I loved the serpent in this last film. Wow. Because physically on set, I think 6 puppeteers were in the body or the giant rig that made the whole thing. And it was truly impressive. 3PO running away, serpent. And then you have something like BB-8, where Brian Herring is there in his green clothes, not only doing that, but I mean, he's so funny. I could understand him totally. Puppeteering, another job you can do in the film industry, is acting through rather like Salacious Crumb, you know? Tim Rose. I was hopeless at it. I tried, but it was Tim's personality. I've told these stories sometimes, but puppeteering adds a real living, visceral quality to an object. So in The Rise of Skywalker, the sets were glorious to behold, to walk in and see stuff. In the desert, absolutely magic, but, you know, that was God's own country. It's sort of, that's for real. I don't think they built many pieces of scenery out in, they built props, again, that word, or the tents and so on like that. But the reason to go to Jordan was the stunning scenery and a stunning country and people, magic.
How would you describe, you mentioned puppeteering and that you don't think that would be for you. Because 3PO is how he is, what would you describe what you do? Does that make any sense? Because your face isn't shown, it's not traditional.
I may have misspoken. I wouldn't say puppeteering wasn't for me, because as I think you begin to allude, I was basically puppeteering inside this costume. And alongside, it's like Babu Frick, puppeteered by 5 or 6 people, all looking like brain surgeons behind me in green, all doing an arm or a foot or a face wiggle on a machine. But the voice was one of the puppeteers going along with it, you know, and we were just crying with laughter at the performance on set. It becomes one, and 3PO's performance is, I guess it starts with my brain and my thought process, my voice, and also at the same time I'm doing whatever's necessary.
Yeah.
And you have one through piece, whereas with Babu Frick you had so many people doing, it's only that big, I think, about that big. I couldn't believe it when we did a test. They built the chair around me in the workshop and they brought in this critter, puppet frick. And I couldn't understand how this was going to work, this tiny thing. But of course, it's beautiful in the shot. So yes, puppeteering. I was puppeteering. Yeah. So yeah, I'm a puppeteer.
When you've got such tiny vision, you're looking through pinpricks, and you've got a performance, a character like Babu, and you're aiming your eyes at him and him only. Does it help you? Because peripherally, I guess you're not seeing the five guys manipulating him. You're completely focused on the performance of the creature.
Absolutely. You do. After all, when you're filming, you are ignoring an awful lot of stuff. You're basically, if you're working over here, you're ignoring the camera. You're pretending that camera isn't coming up really close or coming round to shoot you from here. You have to, your brain has to be working on multiple levels on stage. The whole thing was remember the words and don't bump into the scenery. So all the time on stage, if you're in a show, you're probably 90, 80% thinking about the character and who you're talking to. But the other percent is, that piece of scenery is moved, that actor's in the wrong place, I'm going to have to change this, and so on. You have to get used to it. And sometimes you hear people moaning about an actor saying, he told me to get out of his eye line. Well, frankly, if you are trying to remember the lines and if you're trying to remember what you have to do and who you are and to be aware of the camera, if somebody comes in and kind of stares at you, can really throw your focus for what you're meant to be doing. So, it's always good not to be in people's eye line, to be somewhere on the sides. I've got a question.
Yes, I'm ready.
It's another, what is this?
Oh.
You ready?
Okay. Is it the smallest blue screen in Hollywood?
Very good. I showed you the wrong side, didn't I? I showed you that side. What is this?
Oh, would that be that's early days, isn't it? So, is that your original script?
Yeah.
Wow.
Because I knew we were going to talk. Third draft, August the 1st, 1975.
Wow.
And of course, it's all there. Number 63. And, okay. What's the first line? Go.
Oh, good grief. A long time ago in a galaxy far, far away.
No. First line. Did you hear that? They shut down the main reactor. It'll be destroyed for sure. There'll be no escape for the princess this time. How about that?
That stuck with you.
Yeah. Sorry, you had a question.
That old stuff, the old material, the old paper material, things like scripts and stuff. Does that really evoke a nice memory of back in those days? Yes,
I'd thrown away a lot of stuff, and I used to get truckloads of toys and things which I had nowhere to put. I didn't want to play with them. They didn't mean much to me, so I used to give them away. Can you imagine? One of the things I found, I don't know if you can see it, a slide projector.
Oh, wow.
So you put big torch bulb batteries in it, torch batteries, and there were slides that you push through, real homemade stuff. Back in the day, that must have been so exciting.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So I've got one or two objects, like the old alarm clock. I didn't bring it. There was a bar of soap that was shaped like 3PO, kind of long and thin. And I think I did use one.
Really?
As it whittled down, as you watched it, it became very strange shape. Moving on, you had a question.
I did. It was from our friend Martin Keeler from #Cantina. Would you host Star Wars in concert again if the chance came along?
In a nanosecond, or indeed part of a nanosecond. If you read my book, I Am C-3PO, The Inside Story, forward by J.J. Abrams, the first thing I talk about is Star Wars in concert. Star Wars in concert, for those unlucky enough not to see it in Europe or Japan or America, North and South, Canada, was a compilation of themes from 6 movies at that point, made into specially edited sequences around a theme, the good guys, the bad guys, the hero, princess, droids, that kind of thing. And John Williams had tricked out his music to be in sync with they work together. And it was conducted live with the symphony orchestra. So about 90 orchestral musicians 100-piece choir, this huge screen, and me in a very nice black suit telling the condensed story of Star Wars. And it's the first time I really understood it, frankly, because a lot of the stuff was cut out. So you had the bones of the story. And the energy and joy I felt every night of doing that concert from the audience actually changed my view on Star Wars, changed my view about fans and so on. And would I do it again? I would love to do it. Disney decided the world doesn't need it. Sorry.
That's their loss. You make a
no. It's not. It's not their loss. It's your loss. It's everybody who didn't see it, because it was phenomenal. Yeah. I mean, not just because I was in it. It was phenomenal because it brought John Williams' wondrous music to life. We had 7 cameras, so 1 or 2 would be looking at me. They would be ranging around. So many people have copied it, actually, taking shots in the orchestra as you play. I remember really bigging up the triangle. Because we experimented as we went along. And at one point, we had one of the roving cameras backstage line up with the player and the triangle and the ding. And the triangle is one of the most brutal pieces of it. I mean, that sound zings through any other noise, I tell you. And the audiences loved it. So we had great fun doing it.
This is Steve Bloom, voice of Zeb Aurelius, and you're listening to Fantha Tracks. Caravast. May the force be with you.
The thing I really got was the energy from the audience.
Yes.
Because if you're a theatrical player on stage in front of a live audience, you don't get this on a film set. But there, the energy, the force, if you will, was absolutely, not just when people applaud or laugh, but sometimes in the deepest silence. And I would see faces looking at me or looking at the screen, absolutely rapt. Yeah. And sometimes from very small kids that I used to worry they wouldn't sit through this stuff. Because the power of live music, anyway, huge. Mankind needs this form of communication. We just do. Maybe we got it from the birds. I don't know. They're singing away right now. Wonderful.
That's very true.
The power of music, Shakespeare talks about it. The power of images. We do live in the world of images now. And these were so huge on, 80-foot screen. And we also knew the story. Many of us were familiar with it. The love from everybody. Anyway, I won't go on about it, but I miss it very much, and I would do it within moments.
Oh, I know. People would be so stoked to see it again. And what you say is so right. Because we're so familiar with it, because we love it so much, there's that wonderful sense of anticipation. You know what's coming, but it's just that there's that lovely little limit that's just perfect.
I will say that having got so used to the way the sound, the music was put onto these clips, these sequences, in perfect sync with everything, when I go back and see pieces of the movie for real, the soundtrack isn't the same because it can't be that specific to all those shots. And I really I remember the Ewok battle was ecstatic on our sequence, because it was slightly edited differently. And the conductor would, have to hit that explosion or that Ewok falling over or that Ewok swinging through or the thing, wielding all these orchestral musicians and singers to get there at the same moment. He had a cue screen that would say, here comes the explosion. When it gets to there, bang. So in some ways, it was better than the movies. Having that general knowledge of movies, Star Wars, is so important. It makes the family. And on the set, thinking back to Rise of Skywalker, everybody on that set was a Star Wars fan. Yeah. Even if they work on Superman or whatever, all these big movies, they really want to work on Star Wars because they remember it.
Now that the 9 movies are done, the Skywalker saga, as you call it, is wrapped and completed. And that your time in the suit is probably, by your own admission, probably done. There's hopefully vocal work ahead. You put an Instagram post out the other day, kind of hinting at something or other. How do you?
They just told me that my home equipment, which we're using today, is absolutely no use to them at all. So would I possibly go to a studio soon where they will disinfect everything before my arrival, and certainly after I've left, to use? They really made me feel inferior. I said I'd do it here, but I'm perfectly happy with that. So yes, it's not over yet. Yeah, before we go, I did actually find something that we talked about. Are you ready for this? What is this?
Is that the infamous C-3PO soap?
It is the infamous C-3PO soap. Now imagine the shape after you've whittled it down a bit by rubbing it. I think it's not entirely physically accurate, as you can see.
No.
You can see maybe he was meant to rest. I guess he has a little thing to rest on his back. What joy! What joy! And the final thing, of course, I want to show you is what is this?
Is that the audiobook?
It's the back of the audiobook.
Very nice.
You can get the audio version on Audible, which most of us are doing right now. Yep. But come the day when we're back to normal, I've had copied 1,500 physical things. I think it's 8 discs or whatever. And come the day, I even designed it so there's a place that I can autograph it for people. It's not autographable at the moment. C2 Ventures, it's online somewhere, I can't remember. So you could get a copy from America. But I did think it was necessary not just to do the book in writing, but to, since my voice is kind of known, to put it so that you can listen in the car or whatever. You don't have to read it. Ton of work, but I'm really glad I did it.
Oh, we will be all over that when that comes out. Thank you again so much.
A real pleasure. And in these tough times that will get better, may the force be with you.
If you want to be a part of the action and stay updated on all the latest Star Wars news, visit fanthatracks.com or check out the Fanthatracks app through the App Store to follow us on your mobile device. You can reach out to us and send in your listeners' questions by emailing radio@fanthatracks.com, and please send your questions in. We're always happy to talk. We'll cover as many as we possibly can every episode, and we do look forward to it. It's good fun. Comment, like and share on any of our social media feeds at Fanthatracks, and be sure to subscribe, leave a review, preferably a 5-star one please, on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or your podcatcher or smart speaker of choice. Thanks again, Mark, for being my wonderful co-host on this episode.
Bring me my shuttle.
Well said, and we'll see you all next time.
See you later.
Coming up next on Fanthatracks Radio, it's another episode of Making Tracks.